But on the week, a lot of green on the screen, 1% gains across the board. Healthcare and utilities were the winning sectors today and this week. Healthcare having its best week in 3 years. Concerns about the consumer, though, discretionary stocks lower on the week. Once again, we are seeing the precious metals move higher. Gold above 3,900 now. Silver's up 3%. Cryptocurrencies also rallying. Bitcoin getting close to its all-time high of 124,000 and change. That is the scorecard on Wall Street. Welcome to Closing Bell Overtime. I'm Morgan Brennan. John Fort is off today. Well, the market's shaking off the government shutdown for now. But OMB Director Russ Vought is threatening permanent layoffs and other cuts. We're going to talk to former OMB Director Mick Mulvaney about what the lasting impact could be. And as I mentioned, concerns about the consumer. One place where we're seeing it, restaurant stocks. Big losses this year. Could it get even worse? Well, let's begin with markets hitting new highs, but pulling back from those highest levels in trading today. Christina Partsinevelos is here with all the details. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Morgan. That's how I'm starting. Choppy trading heading into the afternoon, dragged down by some of the market's biggest tech names, of course. Palantir led the S&P 500's decline, falling about 7% on reports of flaws in its battlefield communication systems, claims the company is pushing back on. You got Tesla that fell roughly a little bit over 1%, while Nvidia slipped nearly 1% as well after hitting a fresh all-time high earlier in the week. So context is everything. Still, like you talked about, all three major indices, S&P, Dow, NASDAQ, closed the week in the green, with the small caps Russell 2000s jumping nearly 2%. That's despite ongoing anxieties, I have to mention it, around the government shutdown, which has left investors flying blind with economic data being offline. The real standout, though, this week was healthcare, posting its best week in more than 3 years with about roughly 7% gain on the week. You got Bio-Techne and Charles River Labs, each surging more than 20% for the week, while Johnson & Johnson did notch an all-time high today. And then I want to end with one more tech name, Apple, closing higher despite a Jefferies downgrade. But it still needs, you can see on your screen, barely higher. It still needs to hit $269 a share to join the $4 trillion market cap club right now. It closed at $258. Morgan?
Okay. Christina Partsinevelos, thank you. Well, bond yields moving higher today as the government shutdown drags on. But even with no jobs report, there was some economic data to digest. Rick Santelli joins us now from Chicago with a breakdown. Hi, Rick.
Indeed, Morgan, there was data, service sector data, both from ISM and PMIs were very much less than expected, more on the soft side. And of course, the service sector is the biggest swath of the U.S. economy, considering the negative numbers we've been getting or circling around manufacturing for the last 2.5 years. If you look at a 12-hour chart of 10-year yields, you can see pretty much it's climbed after it had a spike lower in yield on that 9:45 and 10 o'clock weaker than expected service data. And if you look at a 2-day chart, something important going on. We made a lower low right before that data was released, and now we are flirting with making a higher high. We're about equal to yesterday's highs, right around a 412 yield. Should we go a little higher because the cash market's still open for a while? That would be considered an outside day, making this a more technically significant move in terms of yield to the upside. Look at 1 week for 10s. Very fascinating because even though we are now up 3 or 4 basis points in both 2s and 10s. Both maturities are still down on the week, but not by nearly as much as they were earlier. Should we settle at this 412 level we're currently at, we'd be down 6 basis points on the week for a 10-year. And when it comes to the dollar index, let's look at a 1-week chart there. If you recall, yesterday we broke that streak of 4 continual lower closes in a row. We had a slightly higher close, but today we're back down, which means we're not only down for the day, we're down for the week. Morgan, back to you.
All right, Rick Santelli, thank you. Now let's turn to the latest out of Washington as the shutdown is on its 3rd day. Are there actually signs of progress? Well, let's get to Emily Wilkins now for more. Hi, Emily.
Hey, Morgan. Well, lawmakers tried again and failed again to end the shutdown and fund the government for the next 2 months. And look, at this point, there is no sign of progress here. Republicans only got 3 Democrats to join them on this latest vote. That's the same number they had at the start of this shutdown. And again, that's 5 short of what they're going to need to get to that key 60 vote threshold. And remind you, that's with the White House either canceling or delaying funds for infrastructure and energy projects in in states with Democratic senators. That was supposed to be a pressure technique. It hasn't seemed to work, at least for now. Plus, the House has canceled their plans to return to D.C. next week. That's their way of increasing the pressure on the Senate to act on the bill that the House passed rather than a potential bipartisan bill, which, just to be clear, we don't even have that bill yet. We don't know how this is going to end. Pressure is continuing to increase on Democrats to reopen the government. The longer the shutdown goes, the more impacts it has. But Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is still calling for Republicans to negotiate on health care provisions.
Republicans hold the House, the Senate, and the White House. They're in charge. American people know that. And the American people know that it's only smart and fair and right that they should negotiate with us if they want our votes.
Senators are now headed home for the weekend, meaning that a shutdown is going to go through Saturday, through Sunday, and into Monday evening. Morgan?
All right, Emily Wilkins, thank you. So what are the consequences if this shutdown drags on, and what will it take to come to a deal? Let's bring in Mick Mulvaney, former White House Chief of Staff and former head of the Office of Management and Budget, among other things. Mick, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Morgan, thanks for having me. Happy Friday.
You too. So I want to start right there. We had another attempted vote in the Senate that failed. 5 more Democrats that need to come to the table to see a clean continuing resolution actually passed, assuming that's what happens. What do you think the next steps are in this process of horse trading, if you will?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of progress next week. Look, you deal with shutdowns in terms of pain points. What's the next important thing to happen? The first thing has already happened, which is the government shutdown. It causes a little bit of pain. Not much, but some. The next pain point is, I think it's the 15th. It might be the 14th this month. I lose track. I don't pay attention to the details like I used to. But that's the next payday for a lot of federal workers. Keep in mind, there's a lot of media coverage saying, oh, people are working today without getting paid. People got paid last week, right? They got paid their ordinary end of September payday. They wouldn't have been paid today anyway, but they would have gone to work. So they go to work today. They're not really not paid until they missed their next paycheck. And that's the middle of the month. That's the next pain period. I think that gives you the first window of when you can sort of see a negotiation going on. There's not much difference between settling a government shutdown today and the 12th of October. For that reason, in addition, I think the House is probably out until the 13th or 14th, that you're not going to see any progress soon, but you might see some progress before that next pay period mid-month October.
Okay. October 15th is what the GSA website tells me here. I mean, that's essentially what markets are preparing for, too, a standoff that's going to last 1.5 to 2 weeks before real concern sets in, at least from an economic standpoint. I mean, historically, that's typically how long these last, right?
Yeah, but the economic standpoint is I think you can make the case there's really not much economic impact here, generally speaking. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to diminish this. If you're not getting paid and you need to get paid, it's a huge economic impact on you. I'm talking now about the larger economy. People forget that during his 8 years in office, Barack Obama's best economic quarter was the quarter of a government shutdown in 2013. So there's no straight line from a government shutdown to a worse performance by the American economy. But yeah, you're right. There's going to be some localized difficulties, especially in Maryland, Northern Virginia, other places where there's a lot of government workers. I think there's one thing here, Morgan, a lot of people have missed over comparisons to the 2019 shutdown, which lasts 35 days. During 2018-19, during that longest shutdown in congressional history, in government history, we had already passed the military appropriation, the defense appropriations bill. So the Defense Department, the soldiers, men and women, were getting paid. They are not getting paid now. That ratchets up the temperature, which again comes back to why I think you probably see something before mid-month.
Yeah, that's a very key point. Stay right there, Mick, because we have some breaking news on the Middle East. We're going to go to Eamon Javers for the details. Eamon.
Morgan, we've got a new statement from Hamas here in response to President Trump's peace proposal for the Gaza Strip. A seemingly positive response here from Hamas to the president. They say in this very long statement, a key section here is they say, in order to achieve a cessation of hostilities and a complete withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, the movement announces its agreement to release all Israeli prisoners, both living and dead, according to the exchange formula contained in President Trump's proposal. provided the field conditions for the exchange are met. They also say the movement also renews its agreement to hand over the administration of the Gaza Strip to a Palestinian body of independents or technocrats based on Palestinian national consensus and Arab and Islamic support. So this would seem to be an acceptance of much of what President Trump laid out in his proposal. I will point out, Morgan, the language here is a little bit conditional, so we'll have to see what the diplomats make of this, because they're saying that they are prepared to release all the Israeli prisoners, both living and dead, provided the field conditions for the exchange are met. Not clear to me on first read exactly what field conditions are met might mean and how much wiggle room that gives Hamas here. But this White House may be encouraged by this statement. I just spoke very briefly with Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. She was just receiving this news at that time, and she was on her way to talk to the Secretary of State and get the official U.S. government response. So I expect we will have a response here from the White House and from the Secretary of State momentarily. We don't have that just yet, though, Morgan. Back over to you.
Okay, when you get it, bring it back to us. Eamon Jabbers, thank you. Mick Mulvaney, I'm going to turn back to you and put you in the hot seat a little bit here and shift from domestic politics to geopolitics and just see if you have a reaction to this news that we just got.
That's all right. We used to do it all the time in the White House. It's what you sort of have to do with the job. Look, I think Eamon hit the nail on the head. As he was reading that, I was thinking the same thing he commented on towards the end of that little segment right there, which is what are field conditions? That's a term I'm not familiar with from the original 20-point proposal. I do recall some requirements about how the governance of Gaza would be turned over to an independent body, and that Hamas would either have to leave or agree to give up violence and so forth. I don't know if that's agreed to, if that's part of their offer. But look, I think it'd be foolish not to view this as at least progress. This is further along towards the path towards peace that we were 20 minutes ago, or certainly a week ago. So Eamon's right. You got to look at the conditional language. But it sounds like at least Hamas is interested in using the 20-point framework as a negotiating sort of starting point.
And if I shift back to the domestic conversation we started here with, the idea that the administration is beginning to withhold some funding, particularly to specific blue states, the idea that the OMB director is looking to potentially start making some deeper job cuts within the federal workforce as well. How much does that change the dynamic and the calculus amid these negotiations for a continuing resolution?
It absolutely does. It gives the White House leverage. It just does. Donald Trump has figured out that spending is leverage and not spending is leverage. And there are going to be phone calls made from various people all around the country. They have already been made to various moderate Democrat senators saying, look, if you let Russ Vought have his way, this program will end or that funding will stop. Please vote for the continuing resolution. That's what this is about. This is not by accident. Look, Russ Vought was my deputy for 3 years. The man probably knows more about the way the government functions than anybody in Washington, D.C. And they've been waiting for this period, for this opportunity now for a long time. So no, it's not by accident. They're deadly serious about cutting these programs, and they're letting the Democrats know about it. That's what fascinates me, Morgan, is they sent out the letter and said, look, if you shut the government down, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. That's negotiating 101, and I was really impressed to see that. So, look, my guess is, and this is not the question you asked, the Democrats will eventually vote for a CR. Everybody does. The continuing resolution always wins in these battles. Take Republican, Democrat titles away. The people who are trying to use a shutdown for leverage don't get what they want, and the continuing clean resolution wins out. And I think that's where you end up here for part of the reason, but not all the reason, is that exactly what you just talked about. The Democrats don't want those cuts that the OMB director Russ Vought is talking about.
Do you think those cuts come one way or the other regardless? And I ask that because I think it's not just everyday Americans who are watching, but it is also the bond market and investors as well when things like the deficit are in such big focus.
It's a great question. I'm not going to dodge it, but give me a second to play this out. It depends. We don't know yet. Here's why. We believe, and Russ and I used to work together, and we always thought that we had more authority, more discretion when we were operating outside of the appropriations process. Technically, a government shutdown is called a lapse in appropriation. So right now, the reason the government shut down is there's no appropriations. So we're not really impounding any money which is illegal, by the way. If you believe the Budget Control Impoundment Act is unconstitutional or is constitutional, you can't impound funds. But can you do it when there's no appropriation process? So the answer to your question is this. Russ believes that he's got more authority during a shutdown than he would during the ordinary appropriations process.
All right. Mick Mulvaney, great to get your thoughts and insights today.
Thanks, Morgan.
Appreciate it. You too. All this talk about the Mag 7 and NVIDIA, but NVIDIA is the best performing Mag 7 stock. It's only up 40% this year. Sounds good, but it's underperforming gold, and it's really lagging behind silver. So can precious metals continue to outperform the biggest tech names? We're going to dig into that on the other side of this break. We'll be back in 2.
What if there was a cruise that felt like no other? A cruise created by foodies for foodies. One chef for every 10 guests. Every meal prepared to order, and every plate a personal discovery. Welcome to the world of Oceania Cruises, the world's greatest cities and off-the-beaten-path secrets. One memorable bite and toast at a time. It's more than a feeling. It's more than a cruise. It's Oceania Cruises.
Crypto staking just hit Wall Street. For the first time ever, staking rewards are available through a U.S.-listed ETF. Introducing SSK, the Rex Osprey Sol plus staking ETF.